may be seated. Thank you.
Your Honor, at this time, the State of Florida will call Charles Cummings.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You want to move yourself there and just right this way. Watch yourself. You're going to be going right around and sitting in that green chair. Watch yourself there. Speak into the microphone and it does adjust, so please adjust it.
Thank you. May it please the court, defense counsel. Good morning, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Chuck Cummings,
Mr. Cummings, where are you currently employed?
Humana Healthcare,
How long have you been with them?
about 22 years.
Prior to that, what line of work were you in?
I was in the insurance business about 35 years. Prior to that, I was in the beverage business.
And sir, do you live in the Pasco County area?
Yes,
How long have you lived in the area?
I have lived in Land O'Lakes for the past 14 years.
I want to draw your attention to January 13th, 2014. Do you recall that date, sir?
Yes, I do.
Did you have plans that day with your son?
Yes, I did.
What plans were those, sir?
To take a day off from work and to go to the movies with my son to see a movie I wanted to see,
What movie was that?
A Lone Survivor.
And was this a special day to take off work for you and your son?
It was my birthday.
Do you recall what time you arrived at the Cobb Theater to see Lone Survivor?
1:10, 1:15, 1:16.
And do you recall what you were wearing that day?
I was wearing a blue shirt, cut off a pair of jeans, and flip-flops.
Were you in the military, sir?
Yes.
And did you have a military cap on as well?
Yes, I had a military cap on.
When you arrived at the theater, you all purchased your tickets out front?
Yes.
And when you went in, did you get any kind of concessions or anything like that?
No.
Where do you prefer to sit when you go to the theater?
I prefer to sit about the mid to upper rows, and I prefer to sit in the middle.
When you got there, were you able to sit in the middle?
No, those seats were already taken.
Were they taken by someone who later became known to you as Chad Olson and Nicole Olson?
Correct.
At that time, when you got there, did you and your son sit down in that row, the second row from the top of that section?
Yes.
And do you recall the lighting conditions when you all first arrived?
I guess about half the lights were on.
Were the previews starting to run yet?
Yes, they were.
Were you able to see your son, Alex, next to you?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to see down the row to Nicole and Chad Olson?
Yes.
How many seats away do you believe Nicole Olson and Chad Olson were at that time?
3 or 4.
Were you able to see them fairly easily?
Yes.
Were you able to see 10 seats away easily?
I could, but I wasn't looking.
Okay. What about down in front of you? Were you able to see people
I could see people, yes.
drinking, eating, that type of
Yes,
thing?
yes. I noticed the movie wasn't that crowded.
You didn't have any problems finding your seats with the lighting that was there, did you?
No.
Now, do you recall what previews were playing when you first took your seats?
No.
Do you recall the volume of the previews that were playing when you took your seats?
I guess of the average volume.
Were you able to hear Alex talking next to you?
When we conversed, we could hear each other, yes.
Could you hear somebody 5 seats away if they were talking?
I could.
What about 10 seats away?
I wouldn't say I could hear 10 seats away, no.
If somebody had their voice raised, were you able to hear them?
Yes,
Now, you indicated that Chad Olson and Nicole Olson were already seated in the theater when you arrived. Did you see anything they were doing, any contact between the two of them?
between the two of them, no. I noticed that there was a light and of a cell phone on Chad Olson's leg.
And did you indicate anything to Chad Olson regarding the illumination of that screen?
No,
When you arrived in the theater, did you happen to see someone who later became known to you as Curtis Reeves?
not specifically. I just saw a couple sitting behind him.
At some point, did you see that person, later known as Curtis Reeves, exit the theater?
Yes,
And can you describe how he did so, please?
he did. I think he left in fact, I know he left the theater in a little agitated mood because he was kind of talking to himself as he passed by our seats.
When you say talking to himself, did you hear any of the words that he was saying?
No, but he doesn't sound like a happy camper.
When you say he was talking to himself, was he mumbling under his breath?
Mumbling to himself, correct.
When you say he didn't seem like a happy camper, can you elaborate on that,
No,
please,
the
sir?
tone wasn't. The tone was someone who's not happy about something.
Did he make contact with your seat as he exited that row of the theater?
He contacted the back of my head a little bit.
Okay. In the back of your head, do you believe that that was with his leg or his hand, or do
No,
you
I believe it was
recall-
with his leg.
Do you recall how long he was gone from the theater?
2 or 3 minutes.
When he returned, did you observe him walking up the row?
Yes,
Did you have any problem catching him as he came up the stairs? And I say catching him, catching sight of him. You could see him, the lighting was okay for you to be
Yes.
able to see him?
yes.
And when he walked up the stairs, did you notice anything about his demeanor at that time, sir?
He was walking a little fast.
And when he got back to the row behind you, did he make any contact with you as he walked by you?
No,
Could you hear him again mumbling under his breath?
no.
How was his demeanor at that point?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Other than he walked up fairly quickly up the stairs?
Fairly quickly.
Now, at some point, you're still watching the theater screen, right?
Correct.
At some point, did something draw your attention with your peripheral vision to your left?
Yes.
What was that?
There was some discourse. There was some back and forth between.
Now, when you say discourse, what leads you to choose that word?
Because there was a conversation between both people because
Right.
they were
Now,
speaking to each other.
Okay, could you hear what, let's start with Chad Olson, who's closest to you on your row, actually. Could you hear what he said?
I heard what he said. I did not hear what Mr. Reeves said to him, but I know Chad Olson said, "You try to get me thrown out of the theater," or something along those lines.
All right, and you could not hear what Curtis Reeves said, but you could hear words coming from him?
Correct.
And based upon that, were you looking down the row?
Yes, I looked over and then I went back to the screen.
And at some point after hearing, you're trying to get me thrown out of the theater, and then hearing another voice from behind you, what happened next?
It seemed like Chad stood up, turned around. I went back looking at the screen, but at the peripheral of my vision, I could see that he was standing up. Very soon after that, there was popcorn in the air.
And when you say there's popcorn in the air, do you have any idea how the popcorn got in the air?
No, I did not know how it got in the air. I caught the popcorn as it was in the air. I'm not sure how it got there.
And that's because you were watching the previews on the
Correct.
screen in front of you.
Correct.
Now, you say you saw popcorn flying in the air. At that point, did you turn your attention toward your left?
I looked and saw the popcorn up in the air. Yes, it caught. I did turn my neck.
Okay. Did you see anything at that point?
Yes, I saw the flash of a gun and heard the sound of a gun.
What did you hear or see next?
The next thing I knew, Mr. Reeves said something along the lines of throw something in my face.
And
Followed-
let's back up. Now, you said when you looked, you saw the flash of a gun. From where was the flash of the gun coming?
It came from the row behind Mr. Olson.
Okay. And you saw the flash of the gun, heard the shot, and then heard Mr. Reeves say what?
Something along the lines of throw popcorn in my face.
Okay. And at that point, what did you see?
Immediately after that, his wife came past me.
His wife being whose wife?
Mr. Olson's wife came past me, moaning and crying a bit, and followed by Chad Olson.
All right. And did you hear anything that Chad Olson said upon seeing the muzzle flash and hearing the shot?
When Chad, he went 2 or 3 seats, and he collapsed on my right side, and he collapsed on my son. But right before he collapsed, he said, "I can't believe he shot me."
So you're seeing, who's later known to you as Nicole Olson, running by screaming. At that point, did you realize she had been shot?
No,
And now you're looking and you're seeing Chad taking a couple steps towards you, so toward the aisle,
right.
and he collapsed on your lap.
He collapsed on myself and on my son, yes.
What did you do at that point?
Well, we positioned him on the floor and started pumping on his chest. I told my son to leave the theater and call 911.
Okay. So as he's taking those steps and he makes that statement, which was what?
I can't believe he shot me.
So then you immediately attempt to perform CPR on him?
Correct.
Or chest compressions at the least, right?
Correct.
Was there anybody else in that area that was helping you with chest compressions or CPR?
Another person did show up. They were on this side of my vision, which isn't
Now
my
you
good
say
eye.
this side is your right side for the record?
Yes, so I didn't know who that person was, but some person did assist with the CPR.
And at some other time, did somebody take over for you?
No, Chad's head stayed on my foot the entire time until the SWAT team arrived.
Okay, until law enforcement arrived?
Yes.
And when law enforcement arrived, shortly thereafter, did fire rescue arrive?
There were a number of people who worked for the county who were there, yes. I'm not sure what role each person had.
But at some point, Chad was tended to by actual medical personnel?
Correct. The ones who brought the stretchers.
And were you still up there in row 2 or row B, as we're referring to it, when they arrived?
Yes, they told me, we'll take him now.
And that would have been somebody in a uniform?
Correct.
What did you do at that point?
I stood up and went looking for my son.
And did you find your son?
Yes.
Where was he?
He was back in the theater, I can't remember if he was back in the theater or he was outside.
And at some point, did you speak with law enforcement?
Not then, no.
Okay. At some point, were you asked to fill out a written statement?
Later, yes. And it seemed like about a half hour later.
And during that time, where were you waiting to speak to somebody?
We went down into the lower level of seats,
Down by where the railing was?
past the railing, into the seats that are closest to the screen.
About approximately how many people were there?
10 to 15 or to 20.
At that point, did you...
They weren't all in the same area we were. They were kind of both spread out.
So groups of people, I'm assuming you're with your son.
Yes, just my son. Mhm.
How old is your son?
Today he's 37.
Now, at that point when you went downstairs, did you see where Curtis Reeves was?
I knew he was still sitting in the seat, and he was sitting with another gentleman. Another gentleman had sat beside him, or sat next to him. I'm not sure what side, but there was another person sitting beside him who was a male.
And do you see Curtis Reeves in the courtroom this morning, sir?
Yes.
Can you point him out and describe what he's wearing?
He's right over there.
Okay. Can you give me just a tie color or something?
No, he's got a suit on,
Okay.
glasses.
And Judge, if the record could reflect, he identified Curtis Reeves as the defendant. Now, after the shot had rang out, did you see anybody come to Curtis Reeves?
No, I didn't see it at that time, no.
Because your attention was toward what?
Towards working with Mr. Olson.
Now, you indicated that you were down near the front of the theater with 10 to 15 people standing next to your son. Were you discussing what you had just seen?
No.
Did you overhear anybody discussing what they had seen?
They might have been talking to each other, the couples that were there, but.
But you didn't overhear any of that?
No.
And when you made that written statement, did you just try to get something down on paper
Yes, I was not in the mood to write statements.
based upon a number of factors?
Just based upon, I know there would be some more sophisticated follow-up.
And you were upset at the events of the day?
It upset in many ways, yes.
One minute, second here. No further questions, no. That's it, the witness.
Cross?
Thank you, Judge.
Still morning. Good morning, Mr. Cummings.
Morning.
What I'd like to do is I'll kind of start at the end with something that you just testified about. Now, you told the prosecutor that after the incident, there were a lot of people, patrons, from within the theater that were kind of grouped to the lower left-hand section looking at the screen, correct?
Yes,
And you all were grouped there. You said it seemed like almost a half hour before you were actually handed forms to fill out, correct?
around that. Yes.
Now, you told the prosecutor that you weren't aware of anybody that was discussing the case. Is that what you told her?
I don't know what they were discussing.
Okay. You remember giving a deposition. You know what that is, right?
Yes,
From business, you probably are familiar with the term deposition, correct?
correct.
Where you come in, swear to tell the truth with a court reporter, remember?
Yes,
Mr. Escobar was there.
Again, I'm going to make the objection, this is improper impeachment, the way he's doing this. There's been no indication that there's been anything inconsistent at this point. Obviously, we don't have a copy of the deposition.
I'll show them the page in line, Judge, that's fine.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that you remember giving a deposition and swearing to tell the truth.
correct.
For the record, what's the line, Peggy?
Yeah, I'm getting there, Judge. There are a bunch of lines. I apologize. I'm not big on highlighting. I underline stuff, and so I just need a moment, if I may.
No problem.
It's page 52. It's line 1 through 12. I'll show you somewhere.
Judge, I would ask you to review that, because I don't believe it's inconsistent.
Your Honor, his testimony was that nobody was discussing it. I think this is pretty clear.
Yeah, that's all over them.
Put it in context, the first question you were asked was, okay, how many people were down there in that section, would you say? Answer, 15 to 20. Question, okay, when you got down there to that section, were people conversing amongst themselves? Answer, your answer, some were. Question, okay, and were they conversing about the incident that they had allegedly witnessed? Your answer, yes. Okay, you remember that?
When was the deposition?
My question is, do you remember giving the deposition, giving that answer?
I don't remember the date of the deposition.
Title's the net on me, we need a predicate.
I'm getting it for him, Judge. March 16th, 2015. Okay?
15?
Which you would agree is 2 years prior to today, so it's closer in time, correct? Right?
It's 2 years.
Right, well, it's 2 years before today, 2 years.
Correct.
And so it's closer in time, right?
To,
To when the incident happened.
yes,
Okay, so you would agree your memory would have been better then than it is today, correct?
possibly.
Okay. Well, were you not telling the truth under oath at the deposition?
No, I'm gonna object argument.
No, we tell the truth all the time.
Okay. So you would agree with me then that your memory is probably better 2 years ago than it was today of an incident that happened 3 years ago, right?
In many things, it could have been, yes.
Okay. So you don't disagree with that statement that you made, correct?
Say it again.
Okay. Question. When you got down there to that section, were people conversing amongst themselves? Answer, some were. Question. Okay. And were they conversing about the incident that they had allegedly witnessed? Answer, yes. Okay?
Yes,
Okay. Now, you didn't talk to anybody, but you heard other people talking. That's the point.
I heard them talking, yes.
Okay.
But
About what happened.
I'm not quite sure in every case what everybody was talking about.
Okay. But you remember giving the answer to that question.
Correct.
You didn't misunderstand the question, did you?
Maybe.
Okay. So you misunderstood the question.
Maybe I misunderstood the type of question was being asked. Did I hear what they were saying? Did I hear if they were talking to me? I answered the question as best as I could at that time.
Okay. So tell me, what part of the question did you not understand? When you got down there, you understand that part?
Yes,
To that section, you know what we're talking about there?
yes,
Were people, and you know who we're talking about,
Yes.
right?
yes,
Conversing amongst themselves. So just talking. You said they were talking, right?
Yeah.
No, not a problem. And were they conversing, right?
yes,
You understand? About the incident, you know what we're talking about, the
Yes.
incident
yes,
that they had allegedly witnessed, right?
yes.
So that's clear.
Correct. The clarity part is if the couples, if two people had come to the theater, they were talking to each other. This couple over here could be talking to each other, not they were all talking to everybody else.
Okay.
That's the
No,
clarity.
I
part.
understand. So not necessarily they were talking to everybody else, but at least people were grouped together, whether it was in couples or the buddies they came with, and they were talking about what happened.
Yes,
Okay, so we can agree on that.
Yes.
I understand. So it wasn't like somebody's announcing, hey, this is what I saw, and
No, no,
regaling everybody.
correct.
You heard groups of people talking about what they witnessed, right?
correct.
Fair enough. Now, let's talk about kind of the sequence of what happened going through, if we could. Now, I understand at one point you were talking about an individual, a young man came to Mr. Olson's aid, as you did, and he came from your right side, and I know that you have difficulty with peripheral vision in your right side.
Yes,
Your right eye. So that's one of the reasons you like to sit in the middle or on the right side, so your good eye is looking towards the screen.
correct.
Okay. Now, in this particular case, you arrive at the preview. So the previews had already started as you walk in the theater with your son.
Yes,
And they're pretty loud because they're previews.
yes,
Okay. And at that point, I'm going to try to maybe organize this into like 3 conversations. Maybe that will be helpful in understanding. When you first get there, you hear 2 people having a conversation. You recall that? During the previews.
yes,
Okay. And at that point, you could hear the voice of the individual who later became known to you as Mr. Olson, right?
yes,
During the first conversation.
yes,
And you don't really hear Mr. Reeves in that initial conversation, right?
Not his voice, no, not what he was saying.
I understand. And the thing that you hear is something regarding the words texting and maybe 2-year-old daughter or daughter from Mr. Olson.
Correct,
Okay, and that's the first conversation, right?
correct,
We can agree you didn't hear any curse words or cuss words.
no,
And what happens shortly thereafter is that Mr. Reeves gets up, right?
yes,
And leaves the theater.
yes,
Now, you say that he was muttering, but we can agree that you don't know whether he was talking to the people as he passed them, right? Because you didn't hear what he said, right?
no, I didn't hear his words, no,
Okay. You don't know whether he was saying something to his wife as he left or talking to her down the aisle, right?
no,
Okay. And you weren't looking at him because you were still focused on the screen.
correct,
In fact, Mr. Reeves passes behind you. He bumps into your chair, but at that point, your seat was at least a little leaned back, and you're kind of a big guy.
yes,
And so you didn't take it to mean that Mr. Reeves bumped into your chair intentionally, right? You didn't
No.
feel that? Okay. It just could have been he's making his way through and bumped into your chair, right?
yeah,
And the first time you see Mr. Reeves is as he's walking down the steps, excuse me, that would lead an individual around the corner to go into the lobby.
yes,
So you get a visual on Mr. Reeves there. Now, and when Mr. Reeves goes down the stairs, he doesn't walk quickly, he walks down normally, right?
I can't say how, he came back fast, I'm not sure how fast he went down.
Okay. So you would agree with me, it didn't draw your attention that he went down the stairs in any kind of unusual fashion?
Correct,
Now, about 2 to 3 minutes later, Mr. Reeves comes back.
correct,
And when Mr. Reeves comes back, there's a second conversation.
yes,
And in that second conversation, again, you recognize Mr. Mr. Olson's voice
yes,
from the previous conversation, let's call it, right?
yes,
And you don't hear what Mr. Reeves says.
no,
Now, at that point, again, you kind of focus your attention back to the screen, correct?
correct,
And 15 to 20 seconds later, approximately, there's a third conversation.
I'm going to object to that mischaracterization of the time frame. He didn't indicate any particular time frame at that point on direct examination.
Sustain, rephrase, or
Okay.
clarify.
Within 15 or 20 seconds, is there a third conversation?
That's the same question.
Judge, he can answer the question if he agrees. I'm leading him. Okay, in
Well,
15,
It's a double question. Was it 15 or 20 seconds, and was there a second or third conversation? So break it
Okay.
down, if he knows how long the time.
he does, Judge, he does, he does. If in 15 to 20 seconds, does something else draw your attention to that same area where Mr. Olson has been speaking loudly to Mr. Reeves?
that's when he got loud at
Okay.
that point,
And so that's the third conversation.
correct,
Now, in that third conversation is when Mr. Olson, in a very elevated, loud voice, says something to the effect of trying to get me kicked out of the movie theater.
something along those lines, yes,
And it's during that time when Mr. Olson, you see him stand up and turn around towards the back row,
correct,
facing where Mr. Reeves would be.
correct.
Leaned over a little bit, but not leaned over a lot. That's what you remember, right?
He didn't, yeah, he was a very tall person, so if he leaned over a lot, he would be very noticeable, but he was not leaning over a lot,
Okay, but still leaning towards the back row, right?
slightly, yes,
Okay, and like you said, he's tall, so he doesn't really have, if you're tall, you don't have that far to go to get there, right?
yes,
Objection, I have
Okay.
an answer.
Now, at that point, you see popcorn fly, right?
Yes,
Pretty quickly.
correct,
And what you do is you turn away briefly, right?
correct.
Kind of shake your head,
Yes, yes,
and then you turn back, right?
correct,
And that's when the shot goes off.
correct.
And let's go back and talk about those 3 conversations that we talked about just now in sequence. Now, in the first conversation, we can agree that Mr. Olson's voice was louder than Mr. Reeves' voice,
Yes,
because you can actually hear what Mr. Olson is saying.
yes. Mr. Reeves would lean up, whatever he was saying to Mr. Olson, he would lean up and say it in his ear,
Okay.
right? Did not hear what he was saying.
Okay, so not yelling, but maybe leaning over and speaking in a kind of a civilized fashion, right?
Yes.
I'm going to object to the characterization of that.
Now-
He can't hear what he's saying, so how can he have that characterization?
Okay, now, still talking about that first conversation. Mr. Olson was talking about texting his daughter in a loud voice, right?
Well, he gave him an answer.
Well, what you heard was something texting my daughter, a 2-year-old daughter, something to that effect, right?
Correct.
And it was in a loud voice.
He wanted to be heard, yes.
Was it a loud voice? Do you
No.
agree with me or
It
disagree?
it wasn't a loud voice, it was normal speaking tone, as I'm doing right now.
Okay. In that normal speaking tone, would you characterize your speaking tone as authoritarian?
Right now,
Yes.
informational.
Okay. Authoritative?
Objection, asked and answered.
No, it's a different question. Authoritative?
No,
Okay. And so you're saying Mr. Olson's voice sounded like yours.
correct. He was giving an explanation as to what he was doing.
So is your testimony that Mr. Olson's voice, when he was talking about texting his daughter, as we're talking about now, we agree, right? Was not loud,
Conversational.
it was not authoritarian,
No,
and it was not authoritative.
no.
Page 20, starting at line 22, going through page 21, ending at line 5.
I would object to that line of questioning regarding.
The question was the voice loud? He answered that. I asked him if the voice was authoritative. He said no. I asked him if the voice he heard was authoritarian. He said no. I don't think it's a pro forma objection.
No.
Back to that same deposition in March of 2015. Question, and the context is we're talking about that same segment, okay, the first conversation. Question, what was the tone and pitch of that voice? Answer, it was, he started to say he was explaining to someone about texting and something about his daughter. Question, was he doing that in a loud voice? And your answer is authoritarian, period. Authoritative, period. And authoritative voice. Okay? So those are comments you made, right?
Okay.
All right. Now, let's talk about the second conversation. Now, at that point, Mr. Olson is still in the theater. Mr. Reeves has gotten up, right? And Mr. Reeves comes back. So that's kind of where we're at. That's the second conversation. Remember having that second conversation, right?
Okay.
Okay. Now, that second conversation, we can agree that Mr. Olson sounded irritated, right?
Yes,
And in addition to that, Mr. Olson also sounded mad, right?
irritated and mad.
Third conversation, about within 15 seconds. That's the conversation regarding trying to get us kicked out of the theater, something to that effect, right? You know where we're at now?
Yes,
Now, in that one, again, Mr. Olson said what he said in a loud tone,
yes,
still irritated, continuing to be irritated, right?
yes,
And not only that, but Mr. Olson was yelling, right? Yelling, right?
he was speaking above he was speaking above the tone he spoke when he was telling him about the,
Agree or disagree with me that he was yelling?
there may have been a couple of words he yelled, but not the entire sentence that I can remember.
Was he yelling or not yelling?
Parts of,
That is asking the answer.
He did, I was listening.
Okay. So your answer is then that he yelled, right?
yes.
And
He
the
could
way
have
it
yelled,
sounded.
he could have yelled louder.
Okay. And the way it sounded to you is it sounded like Mr. Olson was PO'd, right?
At that point, yes.
And it's shortly after that, as Mr. Olson is yelling and PO'd, that you see popcorn fly, right?
Yes,
You turn your head,
yes,
you shake your head, right?
yes,
And then you look back and see a shot.
yes,
After that, you are in the theater after you try to help Mr. Olson the best you can. And that's the point, now we go back to the beginning where you're kind of in a theater with a lot of other people waiting for police to come and give you some forms to fill out, right?
yes,
Okay. And while you're waiting, you hear people, maybe not you and maybe not to everybody, but people are
Judge,
talking.
ask the answer. But you
We're-
started
we're
out
co-
with that, Judge, now you're trying to recap again.
I'm not recapping, I'm getting to a question and I'm kind of framing the question.
Go ahead.
And there are people at least speaking amongst themselves regarding what happened, and you overhear that.
yes,
And then it's at that point, sometime after that, that you get a form to fill out, right?
yes,
And we agree on that form, you don't put anything about Mr. Reeves saying anything after the shooting, correct?
correct.
May I have a moment, Judge? I don't have any questions, thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Any reader?
Judge, Mr. Cummings, did you testify at the bond hearing that was held February 5th and 6th of 2014?
Yes,
Judge, at this time, I'd like to address the council page 219 and 220. Line 22, question. Did Mr. Reeves,
May I review it first?
What are we
I
offering
apologize.
this
It
for?
was-
this is a prior consistent statement, Your Honor,
Gives council a chance to get to it, what volume?
as volume, I'm not sure which volume it is.
I think I have the pages separated. If the prosecutor could just give me the page number again, I think I have just Mr. Cummings' section.
Where does Mr. Cummings start, Mr. Michael?
Approximately 209.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like that's volume 2.
Yeah.
It is volume 2.
All right, now where are you?
I'm on page 219, line 22.
Your Honor, he's already testified to that. He's already testified to that.
But he's calling into question his recollection on this, Judge. This was shortly thereafter, and he testified to it at the bond hearing.
He testified here to
Yes,
that.
he did, Judge. So it's not a prior consistent statement. It's improperly being used.
Yeah, I know just a moment ago, wasn't the question, did you write that in your statement?
Right. And that's the same thing that we had with or Sergeant Hamilton
Yeah, but
yesterday.
This one already has testified here today to that, so I'm gonna overrule, or sustain the
Thank you,
objection.
Judge.
All right. There's been some questions about hearing people talking, okay? And I want to make it clear, what you heard, what you might have seen were couples talking, not groups of people talking.
Not groups, people who they came to the movies with were talking to each other. You know, I speculate they're doing the same thing I was doing, like, we never got a form like this before, how do you fill it out? Things like that, what did you know, things like that.
And during the deposition, when Mr. Michaels or Mr. Escobar was leading you into, they were talking about the events that you heard.
Objection, that's improper, Your Honor.
Well, I'm sure you were leading, but,
So the court saw it, and there certainly was, it actually wasn't leading, because it actually gave him a chance to say, no, I didn't hear that, so frankly, if I was leading, I did a poor job.
all right, rephrase.
And I don't have the deposition in front of me, but something to the effect of, were they talking about the events that they had just seen? Can you give us any specifics as to what you heard anyone saying about the events that they had just witnessed on that day?
No, they all blended in. I didn't know any of those people, and they didn't know me, and they were just talking, but I didn't hear anything specific that I could recollect.
Okay.
And then the obvious probably could have been talking about anything. Okay, they could have been talking about where they were supposed to go out to the movies. I have no idea.
And any of those things that you may have heard, did you adopt as your own in a written statement or in testimony here or previously?
No,
How many times did you see Mr. Reeves lean forward to talk to Mr. Olson?
twice.
How many times before he walked out to the manager?
Once,
And then one when he returned?
yes.
Did he have a sense of urgency as he returned up the steps from being
Objection,
gone?
Speculation.
Yeah, I'm gonna sustain.
You already said he kind of walked a little fast. You can argue what you want later.
And when you said he walked a little fast, what makes you think that?
He was walking faster than a normal person would.
To get back to his seat.
Get back to a seat.
He didn't have any problems coming up the stairs.
Correct.
Nothing further on.
Anything else?
It's just, you know, when Mr. Reeves came back into the theater, the previews were still on, correct?
Yes.
And so, like you and your son walk into theater, you walked into the theater maybe not running, but as quickly as possible so you don't miss anything, right?
Objection, speculation.
No, I'm asking you what you did.
What do we do?
Yeah, I don't know what he does.
Well, if we see the seats we want, we'll go a little quicker.
Okay, to make sure you don't miss anything?
No, so we can get them.
Okay, all right, thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
Thank you. May this witness be released? You want him?
He
Bill,
can
what
be on
was the-
standby, he can be released.
All right. Mr. Cummings, you're free to go today. You're still under subpoena. There is a very slight possibility someone might call you back. You'll get plenty of advance notice if that happens. And but if it does, please return as directed. But otherwise, you're free to go today. Thank you,
Judge.
sir.
Thank you.
All right. Lunch break time. Do we need to? Who's requesting what for lunch? An hour and 15 minutes is what we typically do. Is that appropriate for today? All right, good. State, you good with that? You got your witnesses coming, the rest of them this afternoon?
Because the only issue is, as we previously indicated, Mr. Turner has a doctor's appointment, should be here around 2 o'clock. We
Okay.
break for lunch now, we're roughly going to be getting back at about 1:30 or
Uh-huh.
so. We have 2 witnesses to put on, but if we don't take a break, which I hope we will, but obviously I'm going to need a break to talk to Mr. Turner before he goes on the witness
Okay.
stand, so,
That's fine, we can accommodate that.
okay.
Let's go, we'll return, say, at 1:35 and be in recess until then. Thank you, everybody.